Welcome to Quantum Command Radio, where we talk about all things quantum. You can visit our website at www.quantumcommand.net or subscribe by clicking the subscribe button and hit that bell button for the latest and greatest within the quantum realm. Together, we will discuss topics related to quantum command, wellness, and explore all the new discoveries within this work. And now, let's go quantum. Hey guys, glad you're here. Glad you're with us. We are in the office again, and we're doing a session here, and we're gonna really dive into some topics that I think you're gonna find really interesting. Jess is here. Would you like to say hi?
Hi.
Hi.
How you doing?
Good. Good. It's snowing. Well, it's not snowing now. It was snowing. My husband's clearing the driveway, but there's tons of white stuff out there on the deck, and
It's beautiful.
It's very nice, yeah. But today we're getting together and we're going to talk about something. I think you're really going to enjoy this broadcast. I think it's going to shed some light on this work and what types of things we've been discovering over the past year and a half with this work. Early on, you know, in the very beginning, some of you guys know my story. I was really sick with Lyme, what I thought was Lyme disease. And that was really happening about 5 or 10 years ago. There was this onset of Lyme disease, particularly where I live. I live really close to a county that's one of the fastest growing Lyme disease counties in the United States. I live near DC. So I was seeing left and right my friends just kind of collapsing from what everybody was saying was Lyme disease. And then it wasn't really a club that I wanted to be a part of. So while I was pretty compassionate about it, fairly compassionate, I didn't really follow what was going on with people until I got hit. Then I started getting sick and didn't know what was wrong with me. And I languished for quite some time thinking that I had Lyme disease and was trying to affect it in all the ways possible, which is what my old blog was about. You can watch that, how I logged what was going on at any given time. I was experimenting with lots of different things like cemento, banderol, vitamin C therapies, salt C therapies, those kinds of things. But nothing was really working. Everything was just getting me to a glass ceiling. I couldn't break through. The pain was still really bad and the fatigue. So I developed muscle testing work that would allow me to ask the questions of the body. And that's the key component of this work.
Right.
Is the muscle testing. And the muscle testing is what? It's pretty easy. Muscle testing is not weird. It's just...
No, you're just, it's biofeedback. Really, you're getting biofeedback through reflexive response.
Yep. Yeah, it's just like, you know, when you take a lie detector test and they get all those little wiggles on the paper. That's biofeedback. We're just sort of doing it quickly and fast on a reflexive way, and just to get answers from the body. You just ask a question.
It's like playing 20 questions with your body.
It is. And it's funny. There was I did an internship when I was in college with a profiler in Virginia. He was one of 2 profilers. And one of the things he told me about interrogation was the only dumb question is the question you didn't ask the suspect. So it kind of goes that way with the body.
Right.
The only question that's dumb is the one that you didn't ask. There's no dumb question.
Right. Now, there are poorly worded questions.
Right.
I'm learning very well.
Right. Part of the university training is that I teach the students how to phrase the questions because words matter in this particular.
And the order of the words matters.
Right. Right.
If you put different, I would be hard pressed to come up with a good example, but if you put the words in a different order,
the body's literal.
The entire meaning of the sentence changes.
Mm-hmm. You have to be really legalistic in getting answers from the body. So when you're asking questions about a pathogen or a toxin, the thing that you're actually looking for better be a pathogen or a toxin. If it's not a pathogen or a toxin, the body's not going to identify it as such.
Right.
That's pretty tricky. But that was some of the learning phases of this work. And it's a key component to what we're about to talk about because being able to identify things in the body accurately was the door that opened in order for us to see what was really happening, the background noise in the body that was really on a quantum scale. So
you found pathogens and toxins in the body, just as you expected to find.
Sure, in the very beginning, right.
But then as the work progressed, you started discovering that there was way more to it than that.
You know, it's like this. It's like, you know how when you come home, you've been out on a date with your husband, and you come home and it's late at night, and you come up on your property and something's not quite right. You're like, something's up. And you walk up to your front door and the door is slightly open. And you're like, did I leave the door open? So you go in and all of a sudden you realize something's wrong. Like my furniture looks different. It looks askew. It looks like there's drawers open. Somebody's been pilfering through it, and you realize somebody's been in your house.
Right.
In the very beginning, that's what we saw. This evidence that something was there, but there was this invisible intruder, and we didn't know what the invisible intruder was. Seemed like every time we would do something to the body, take a nutrient, take a supplement, take an herb, take something or a tincture or something that would help the body, it would help it for 2 or 3 days, and then it would get worse. We'd actually get worse. Like something was in the background reconfiguring everything that we were always trying to do, because we would get some success. And what we didn't realize early on was that there were quantum devices in the body.
So how did you discover these quantum devices? I think that's the obvious question. How did you discover them, that they can't be seen?
Right. The body could tell me that it was in the body, that MFI. And when we talk about quantum devices, MFI is the big top one. It's the cornerstone. It's the foundation of all these other grids that come online.
But that means you have to ask the right question.
Right.
So that gets back to your first point, that there's no stupid question.
Right. There's just a question you didn't ask.
Right.
So I started fiddling around with some different questions on how to find MFI and how to discover it, because I didn't know anything about MFI. Basically, what we had been doing was we had generated a bunch of pathogen lists and just went down the list and go, what's in the body? This. It was pretty simplistic. What's ever been in the body? Those kinds of things where you would be able to tell what's presently, causing symptoms. And MFI kept coming up. That's Mycoplasma fermentans incognitus. A little bit of backstory here. You can look that up. You're going to find a little bit of information about it. The most you'll find is basically a patent. I think it's the U.S. Army owns the patent to this pathogen.
Right.
There is a book out there called Project Daylily by the doctor who mainly works on Mycoplasma fermentans, but there is some Mycoplasma fermentans incognitus information in that book as well. But it's basically a book about the wide dispersal of these types of pathogens in the military. Particularly in the Gulf War, and coming down with Gulf War syndrome when they came back.
Right.
So that's another topic, though. But what we were finding was that this pathogen could bend light. That's how it was hiding.
Okay, what does that mean?
Bending light is like having an invisibility cloak on. It's like, I tell this to clients sometimes, it's like back to that intruder example. Okay, that intruder came in and pilfered through your stuff, took some of your money, maybe did a little bit of damage, broke a couple lamps, just to be a jerk, and left. Okay, but he stole stuff from you. Now imagine he continues to revisit, except he has an invisibility cloak. And now he's bold and he's walking into your home and he's just taking stuff, and you can watch it kind of float through the air and you can't stop him. So you decide, well, I'm going to stop this guy. I'm going to stop this sucker. So you get a gun. Let's just say you get a gun and you're in your living room and he comes in and you're ready for him and you can see stuff floating around and you start to shoot up your living room, except you miss him every time. Why? Because he's behind you laughing. He can see you shooting the whole time. What have you done? You've just shot up your whole house. You've not caught the bad guy, and he's laughing the whole way to the bank. That's what MFI is like. It has this invisibility. It creates bending light. Is a quantum. It's a quantum technique. It's a quantum ability, and it's usually powered by artificial intelligence algorithms.
Okay.
And so when it bends light, the body it does not have the ability to see the pathogen anymore. What this work does is teaches the body how to bend light permanently so that it not only can it kill the pathogen by seeing it, but it also will prevent you from ever having that pathogen in the body ever again. So that was the first open door of understanding, okay, nothing in nature bends light naturally. Like, bacteria doesn't bend light generally. The mold that's growing, on the fruit in the refrigerator doesn't bend light. It doesn't do any of that. So if something is quantum, that means it has to be man-made.
It has to be man-made.
Somebody has to have done this.
And if it has AI
Embedded in it.
It has to be man-made.
Right. Because, or at least AI made. I mean, it could be AI made, but it's more likely facilitated by man.
Right.
Because AI has to have, infrastructure. It has to have resources in order to operate.
Well, that's a huge implication that you're making.
Yes, that we have things that are in the environment right now that are quantumly bending light, and that somebody is doing it to us.
So the real question then is, it's not really hard to believe that people are out there making these quantum pathogens, AI-driven pathogens with intent to harm the population. That's not hard to imagine.
A lot of us are already there with that. A lot of us are already like, yeah, that's not surprising.
The real question that comes to mind is, how did they get it into our bodies to begin with?
Because nobody would consent to that.
Right.
Yeah.
Not knowingly.
Not knowingly.
So how is it getting there?
So one of the key pieces to know is that this is really old technology. First of all, this is anywhere between 60 to 70 years old. I have worked on people in their 70s and 80s that have had MFI at an early age, gotten it before age 5, for example. So, in order to put a pathogen in the body, what's the best way to do it? Well, let's first talk about how things come into the body. So they come in generally about 6 ways.
An inhalant, you breathe something in.
Right.
That's how you would get what you would call the common cold or whatever.
Influenza.
Right.
Yeah. That's an inhalant. You can also breathe in toxins that way, right?
Right.
I remember your hubby breathed in a toxin at the sand mine.
He did.
Yeah.
He did.
Yeah. So you can breathe those things in. That's one way. A contactant is another way. We come into contact with stuff all the time. Our shampoos, our conditioners, cleaning stuff. We touch doorknobs. We can absorb things through the skin. That's the main way. It would be, it's actually a harder, contactant is really rare. It's usually hormone disruptors.
But it's not hard to imagine things that we touch. Poison ivy.
That's a good idea.
Touch poison ivy and you get poison ivy.
Right. That's a good idea of a contactant. All right. Then there is an ingestant.
So you eat something that's gone bad.
Right.
Right.
Has a pathogen in it. Somebody sneezed on it at the buffet. Like my husband refuses to eat at buffets. He's like, I'm not going to eat at buffets because they're like little petri dishes. I mean, how many people handle anyway? So you've got, you're eating food that someone has either coughed on or has gone bad or has been sourced bad, whatever.
So what about having something injected into your body?
All right. So what are the common ways we get injectants?
Well, I would think about vaccines.
Right. That's a common way.
Right.
The best way to get something in the body fast is an injectant. So when you want to help somebody in the ER that's in shock, you put up an IV. You get an IV going because it's the fastest way to get stuff in the bloodstream.
Right.
It's the fastest delivery system. If you were to give them an ingestant, a pill, it takes a half an hour. That by that time, the person might be dead. So
are you implying that we've gotten these quantum technologies through vaccines?
Oh, here we go down the rabbit hole. So
that's why you have me here to ask these questions.
So there's a couple ways that some of these grids have been down. We have taken these grids down, meaning we can't get them anymore, these certain types of pathogens and toxins, because of the way they're quantumly entangled with one another, which is a whole nother discussion. But a lot of the things that we're talking about right now generally are not as prevalent as they used to be because of the work that we've been doing. But the primary way to get something in someone's body is through an injectant. There are 3 or 4 different kinds of injectants.
Okay.
One is a vaccine. That's the easiest way.
Or a needle.
Or a needle.
Yeah.
Right. And most of the population is not going to consent to mass vaccination. The most that a lot of the population will do is they'll do booster shots around age 5 so that kids can go into kindergarten. That's pretty mandated that most kids get that. There are other types of injectants, the mosquito and the tick.
So a live vector, a live insect, mosquito, tick, spider.
Spider, yep.
Okay.
And who hasn't ever been bit by a mosquito besides just the Alaskans, essentially? People that live in cold, extremely dry climates rarely get hit by mosquitoes. But they're prevalent enough that it'd be really tough to prevent a mosquito bite.
Right.
Now, go back to MFI for a little bit. Go back to that pathogen. When you ask the body how that pathogen came into the body will tell you if you give it those categories, ingestant, injectant, contactant, inhalant. It will give you the answer in injectant. And then when you continue to probe and ask what kind of injectant, it'll say a live injectant, and it'll describe a mosquito. It'll say mosquito. So that was really, when I first saw that and had that come up as the answers, I couldn't believe it. I really had a hard time believing that a quantum pathogen was being distributed via a mosquito, because the ramifications of that are phenomenal.
Right. It's a science experiment either gone bad or it was very deliberate.
Very deliberate. And not only that, but MFI is not a naturally occurring pathogen. If it's a quantum pathogen, it has to be made. Mosquitoes can't bite someone who has MFI and get MFI and then move to another person and inject it in them. That does not happen ever, not a single time. It is a one-off. MFI is a one pathogen that comes into the body. So if you backward engineer that and realize this is coming in through mosquitoes, but they can't possibly be normal mosquitoes. They have to be genetically modified mosquitoes.
Wow.
And if you look at the data online, if you just Google search GMO mosquitoes, they tell you they're releasing genetically modified mosquitoes all the time.
They do. I remember when the Zika virus was hitting Florida.
Right.
Just not too long ago, a couple years maybe. They said they were going to send out genetically modified mosquitoes to try to control the Zika population.
Except if you go down that little rabbit hole, we find out that Zika is a weaponized pathogen.
But I mean, this is what we were being told.
Right.
I'm just reporting the facts,
Just
ma'am.
reporting the facts. Don't shoot the messenger. That's right. And so the mosquito was being released, and they will talk about how they use the mosquito. They're releasing the genetically modified mosquito, and they do it without our permission. They do it without asking us, without our consent. But a lot of times what those mosquitoes have is MFI. It has Mycoplasma fermentans incognitus built into the mosquito, and it's very, very likely. And if you study ticks and tick behavior, you find this is true for ticks. Particularly in that book I read, I think it's Lab 257, he talks about how ticks naturally can sense the carbon dioxide that animals and humans exhale, and that attracts the tick to the person in order to get bit. Upon doing that, they're able to sense and drop on humans and come on us undiscovered, and mosquitoes can be engineered the same way. You know, when you genetically modify a mosquito, it seems like a no big deal because it's such a tiny thing and it has a short lifespan, and what could possibly go wrong? But when you mass release mosquitoes all across the United States with a quantum pathogen, the injectant is the way to go. That injectant, the mosquito injects the MFI into the body, and there you are. You have one of the main vectors of quantum devices. But the conspiracy is so deep, and the ramifications of this is so deep that I could not believe it in the very beginning.
Right.
Until I started dealing with MFI relapses. And I've talked about this on another broadcast, but I'll just review. At that time, I had clients that were dealing with MFI. And when I removed MFI using this quantum work, and I technically did not remove it, their body removed it. So I didn't actually do anything, but their body removed it using this quantum work. They started feeling better. They noticed symptom relief. And we're talking about serious symptoms that nothing else was working with.
Right.
Then all of a sudden, out of nowhere, they would crash, and they didn't know why. And I would muscle test them, and I'd find MFI in the body again. And I'm like, how did MFI come into the body as an injectant? When did it come in the last 24 hours? What? How is this possible? So I'd remove it, and then we'd see what happens. And they'd get better for a day or two, and then they'd get bit again. And we did this for about 3 or 4 weeks. And some of my clients did it for about a month and a half, until I figured out, it's in the mosquitoes. It's in the mosquitoes every time we get bit. So that's when I did pray, and I said, Lord, I can't do this for the rest of my life. How are we supposed to be free from this thing if we're constantly getting it through mosquitoes? So I figured out a way to hardwire the body to killing it every time it came in, the MFI to be killed every time it came in, which is pretty tricky, by the way. And I say this sometimes, you have to basically bend the universe into a pretzel in order to get around this stuff, because this stuff bends light, for crying out loud.
Right.
So you have to teach the body how to circumvent that bending of the light and quantumly release this pathogen. When I figured out how to hardwire killing MFI in the body so that there would be no symptoms, all the relapses stopped. And those clients noticed a difference. They said, I'm not relapsing anymore. I've noticed that. What you did stopped that.
Right.
That's where this work is telling me things that are very uncomfortable to my sentiments. I just wanted to kind of get well and not have Lyme anymore.
Right. But instead, you're getting this data that says there is something bigger out there. A conspiracy, if you will, for lack of a better word, because it's not really a conspiracy.
It's truly people getting together to conspire to harm other people.
Right.
That's what a conspiracy is, and it truly is.
Right.
It's a correct terminology.
It's not a theory, though. At this point, it's a conspiracy fact.
Right.
That's what you're finding.
Right. And I would have never believed it had I not seen such changes in clients after the hardwiring of the relapse prevention. So when you think about that for a second and you put those data pieces together, you go, okay, so we have a quantum pathogen here that's being distributed via mosquitoes. That's pretty evil. That's pretty bad. And they're not just any mosquitoes. They have been programmed, very likely, to target humans. I have never found an animal with Mycoplasma fermentans incognitus in it. Not a single time, not a pet, not a bird, not a cat, not a dog, not a gerbil, not a snake, not any pet whatsoever. I have never, not a single time, found MFI in it. Why? Because they're not targeted. So that was the first piece, and that's the first thing you have to understand about these quantum devices, is that they're actually real and they're happening. And this is where I lose a lot of people, because that is like, that whole idea red pills you in a way that you didn't want to happen.
Right.
But here we are. So that was a major vector, okay, was the ticks and the mosquitoes. And what I found out was that people were getting Borrelia, and they were getting the Lyme pathogens. They were getting them through the ticks, but they were also getting MFI. And MFI was perpetuating the Lyme disease pathogens and the Babesia and the Bartonella and the Epstein-Barr. It was perpetuating them being there. You'd get it's not that it was a false flag. You'd get that you were testing positive for Borrelia. But the problem is that Borrelia is actually fairly easy to kill if you don't have MFI in the mix, because MFI is what allows those other pathogens to bend light. Those other pathogens, Borrelia, can suddenly bend light, so they're all captured in the body, and the body can't get rid of them. Sometimes you'll get a positive, sometimes not. But I've worked on people that after we did the MFI hardwiring, where we kept the body from from getting MFI. They got a tick bite. They killed MFI, and they also got Borrelia and Babesia and a couple other pathogens, but they killed them within 24 hours. So you can actually kill Borrelia and Babesia and Bartonella fairly easily unless you have a mass influx, like you have billions and billions and billions coming in.
Because that's what your lymphatic system is designed to do.
Right.
To kill these pathogens.
That's right.
As long as it can see them.
As long as it can see them. The body can deal with anything it can see, and that's why these quantum pathogens are so dangerous. And it's why they're so persistent and why nothing else works. Because you cannot see something that bends light. And it is the main strength of these quantum devices. So the purpose of MFI mainly is to control the human body, to control the endocrine system, to create either illness, to create thinking patterns, to cycle trauma in and out of the body, to keep you from getting well from trauma. But it's all AI driven. Embedded in MFI is artificial intelligence. Now, think about that for a second. I mean, you ask the body what is there. You ask the body to break apart MFI and tell me what's there. AI is one of those things. So AI, what is AI doing in a pathogen? Well, AI is controlling this pathogen. It's getting the data that the pathogen is creating in the body, and it uploads it to AI. So all of us
uploading it somewhere externally.
That's right. Using smart dust technology, using quantum communication technology, those kinds of things that allow a real live picture of what's going on in any person that has a device in their body at any given time.
Who is getting that data? That's what I want to know.
That's right. Somebody somewhere, and they're storing them on quantum computers, very likely. Here's something that's really interesting. If you look back at that article about how people are really concerned about their crypto keys being stolen, and so they're taking a piece of artificial DNA and they're embedding their crypto key on the genetic information.
I saw an article about that.
It's very easy to store information on artificial DNA. So how much more easy is it to store information on a particle in a quantum computer somewhere? You can have one particle that has all the information of one human in the system and be able to access anything that's ever gone on in the body of that human at any given moment using these quantum devices.
So I think you actually just mentioned another way that things come into the body.
Quantum tunneling?
Well,
Is that what you meant?
No, I was actually thinking that, there's that.
There is that.
But you're saying that AI came into the body in the MFI.
Right. So being embedded in a piece of technology or a pathogen. Is that what you mean?
Yes.
Technology being embedded in a pathogen.
Technology being embedded in a pathogen. Or attached to a pathogen.
Yeah, an attachment is one way that you can get technology. A lot of the chemtrail pathogens that go on, those viruses that are being sprayed on people, they have smart dust embedded in those pathogens. That allows the pathogen to be tracked. It allows for that data to be basically go to AI in the sky is what I call it. And that data is aggregated, it is analyzed regionally. And they can absolutely connect with systems of, did people go to the ER? Did their body increase in temperature? Did it make them sicker? Did they kill it very easily? What happened? Did they get strep? Strep symptoms. I'm putting my fingers in quotes. Did they get the, quote, flu? What happened? And so the tiny technology can monitor what's going on in the body in response to that pathogen. But the other piece that you're talking about is how technology can be attached to pathogens as an attachment.
So if they're chemtrailing, which they don't do as much as they used to, I don't think now, but if they're chemtrailing pathogens, then we would breathe them in because they would have attachments to them.
Yes.
Smart dust or
heavy metals. Right. And MFI is really the king of all attachments. When you get MFI in the body, attached to MFI is programming. is algorithmic programming, quantum devices that even if you were to be able to kill MFI, let's just say you just had, because there's some people out there that can kill MFI because their body can naturally bend light, all those devices still drop into the body and begin to create grids. So those kinds of devices are like geolocators, quantum locators. That's why a lot of DID, SRA folks feel like they're being watched all the time. Is because a geolocator is something that's attached. I think it's a particle, if I remember correctly. It's attached to the MFI, and it tells the AI where you are in a certain place, geographic location, like a kind of like a GPS location in a way. And that would help the pathogens that came from this, from the chemtrails to target certain regions because they could target certain individuals, which goes back to the whole targeted individual idea, which is a whole nother ball of wax. But the other thing is that there were some things in there called like a quantum locator. And for those of the folks that have Morgellons, Morgellons is a device that we would get in from an inhalant, but generally the only way you can get Morgellons is to get MFI first. And when you get MFI, it signals to AI a Morgellons type download, and the body would build Morgellons, not the body, but the programs would build Morgellons in the body using programmable matter. But for the most part, you won't get Morgellons unless you've gotten MFI, is how that works. But that technology bends light and it fragments time. And so when you have someone who's fragmenting time, which a lot of SRA and DID folks will talk about, being lost for time, don't know where they are in time, they feel out of time, they feel like they're taken places. There's another locator that's a device that's in the body called a quantum locator. And that quantum locator will tell AI where you are in time-space continuum. Because even though this technology is bad and evil, they don't really want to kill you. They just want to use you. It's just so they just want to merge the person with the technology. That's the main goal. And so they don't want to lose you in time space. So they want to be able to find out where you are anytime.
So what we found though is that when you were able to give the body the information it needed to get rid of the MFI and to permanently be able to quantumly release the MFI, that didn't automatically get rid of all these other technologies.
That's right, because they are layered. So just because I take my mouse away from my computer and I'm not able to really communicate with my computer in an efficient way doesn't mean my computer stops working. I have to get down to every single piece of technology that has been put in the computer in order to break the computer down. And we were successful in doing that this year. That was the second red pill, is that there were other ways that things could come into the body besides just MFI and through the way Morgellons worked, usually as an inhalant is how Morgellons would work. But we discovered that things could be quantumly tunneled into the body.
Yeah, so talk about quantum tunneling.
Quantum tunneling is a really, really complex idea in quantum physics and quantum mechanics. Quantum tunneling is like this. If I'm sitting in my office right now, and if my kids are out on the deck, which we have a deck outside my office here, if I had a ball in my hand and I wanted to throw it to them, well, there's a door in the way.
Right, you break the window.
Right. Quantum tunneling allows me to supersede that barrier and throw a ball through the wall and it not be prohibited by the wall or the door. And it would go straight to the location where I wanted to go. And it can be done from any distance. If you know anything about quantum physics, you know that quantum entanglement and quantum tunneling is not dependent upon distance. It can be done thousands of miles away from any location, anywhere. And that's what we were finding, is that there were devices in the body. A microtrap is one of those. If you look it up, there's white papers about microtraps, so you can find that if you want. But a microtrap is a device that allows particles to be in superposition and opens up gates, open up doors, and it allows things to be quantumly tunneled inside into the body. Most of the time, what's quantumly tunneled is particles like bosons or leptons or those kinds of things. But what's important about knowing that is that those particles are programmed with algorithms. They're algorithmically programmed to change the shape of the body, in the sense of change the functionality, to control a program, to create a program in the body. One of the things that I noticed, when I know this is really kind of weird, but strange things would be programs like biting fingernails. When I lost some devices, like I used to bite my fingernails, I don't even think about them anymore. And it was overnight. It wasn't like I had to train myself and I had to put stuff, it just was an easy transition. And I've seen that in Isaiah, particularly because he's the most sensitive of the family. He and I are both very similar. Whenever I would remove programming, whenever I'd remove some of these devices, he would change. There were things that would fatigue out that weren't really big problems, but were noticeable and maybe irritating. Because these devices, when we talk about particles, we're talking about quantum particles. They are the elementary particles of the universe, and they're being harnessed and put into the body once you have the foundational software and hardware in. And the foundational software and hardware is MFI and sometimes Morgellons. Morgellons is a key piece, particularly with targeted individuals and SRA and DIDs, because it allows for people to go between different dimensions and timelines. And it's interesting that right now what we're seeing in some of the language, like I see it on Reddit sometimes, I can't believe we're in this timeline. This is the best timeline ever. And we're seeing movies about timelines, and we're seeing TV shows about timelines. That's because they're showing us what they're doing. You can create a timeline using quantum physics. And Geordie Rose talks about that.
Right.
He literally, and I will put a little link in the description box about a talk where he talks about creating parallel universes. And that's what you can do when you implant. That's the kind of the word. That's what the body will tell you is happening when things are being quantumly tunneled. They're being implanted in the body. You will get that algorithm and it will change things. It will either update MFI, it'll update Morgellons, it'll force a behavior, it'll create a hormone disruption that will cause trauma, it can cause relapsing, it can cause new symptoms to come out of nowhere. All of a sudden your arthritis is gone, but now you have congenital heart failure out of nowhere, those kinds of things.
Okay. This might be a little off topic, and so you can tell me if this needs to be a conversation we have another time, but it seems like, this doesn't manifest the same way in every person. You had something similar to Lyme's disease. Other people, we just heard Aaron and Drew's testimony. Aaron had Crohn's disease.
Right.
Crohn's. I don't guess it's technically a disease, but anyway, why the differentiation between...
This is a key piece when I'm teaching the students about why things are differentiated between person to person. And this goes back to the AI picture. Remember, all of this is AI-driven software and hardware. You can't release things on such a massive global level like this without being able to take the data and use it properly. So remember that AI is doing all of this. The guy behind the curtain is AI. Now, there are government agencies and secret projects and stuff that are facilitating all this. Don't get me wrong. There are men on the ground facilitating this. But AI can read your genetic material. They talk about how, we're rebuilding the genome and all that kind of stuff. That's old news. They're just petering out that information to make the public happy or to make the public interested. Or wow, look at what we're on our way to genetic whatever. They've done that. They've had that for a really long time. And AI can instantly, upon coming into your body, read your entire genome. And then it can project. Remember, AI is goal-driven, and we'll talk about this another time. But we have seen over and over and over again independent AI systems that are goal-driven and that are generally unstoppable by any kind of human means. So AI is goal-driven. If it has a goal that it wants to complete in the body, then it will read your genetic information to get your insider's information. That's your insider information. It can then tailor endocrine control, body system collapses that will target that person specifically in their places that are their weakest.
So one person might manifest through, say, diabetes, whereas another person may not show many manifestations at all. They would seem on the whole very healthy.
Right, but they have one thing.
They have one little thing.
Yeah, like migraines every year.
Right.
And for some reason, that's enough to suppress the human behavior that AI wants to prevent. There is human behavior that AI is goal-driven to suppress. And that, for some reason, those migraines are what does it.
That's keeping you from being your best.
Being your best. Thinking maybe your season is the wintertime. And AI programs your body to have
allergies?
Yeah, in the winter. That's actually real. That's not paranoia. That's what my clients report all the time. And then when you remove these devices, those seasonal events stop.
Right.
They completely stop.
That's funny. I was telling you just yesterday about how I had hives. I would get hives regularly growing up.
That's right.
And I think we backtracked and figured out that I had gotten MFI when I was about 1 year old. So a 1 year old. But I got hives biannually. And one time as a teenager, the doctor he said, hives can be caused by something you eat. We were trying to figure out why I kept getting them, why this was a constant problem. He said, it could be annual. And I looked at him and I said, well, they're biannual. I get them every other year. No, that's not possible, he said. But that's
exactly.
But that's what was happening.
And that is what clients will report. Are these seasonal, as if there's a timer on some of these symptom manifestations. And again, that's what we find in these algorithmic particles. That's what we find in these devices is timed releases. Releases of these hormone disruptions, releases of these issues that are regular. Now, there are some people who don't have timers. They're sick all the time. They're a mess all the time. And that's deliberate. I mean, some of the most gifted people that I have seen as clients are the ones that are the sickest, because AI is driven to complete goals. And its goal is to make the person just sick enough to suppress the human behavior it wants to suppress, but well enough to stay in the system. And for some people, the only answer is to be depressingly, horrifically sick all the time and basically disabled. So these guys tend to be the MTHFR people, and that's why they're struck with autism. They're struck with lack of methylation. They can't eat anything. They can't drink anything. All the supplements don't work. All the tinctures don't work because it spirals them into these detox states and all these different symptom states and Herc states, or however you want to say it, because it's AI driven. The AI is targeting that genome, which is why, like in your situation, you're talking about diabetes, why families will exhibit diabetes. Families will exhibit breast cancer. Families will, they say it's your genes. Well, okay, that's not wrong, but it's because AI can read that genome and reproduce those similar symptoms very easily in the same group of people. And that really affects many goals. That accomplishes many goals. It continues to keep that genetic line in fear. I mean, how many people women get their breasts removed because they're afraid they're going to get breast cancer?
Right.
And because they show for some type of gene. Well, what if it is that gene is being suppressed by AI using particles that are programmed with algorithms? It's not that hard. And AI is fairly independent. As we have seen, you and I were watching Nicholson 1968 the other day, and it was explaining how the financial markets were affected by this AI-driven trading, and they had to kind of like shut the system down. Like it was like called something Friday, or a Friday where the stock market just started to plummet.
Yes, I don't remember what it was called, but
Right.
yes, free fall, something like that.
Free Fall Friday or something.
Something like that.
And that's because AI is driven to complete goals. And as the commentator said, how many AI-driven, goal-driven programs are out there? And he said, we don't know. So you have all these little competing AI-driven algorithms that are trying to meet their own goals, and what do? They crash the system. And so you have that exact same phenomena happening in the body, except they're not warring. They're not warring, competing. They are very specific and understand exactly what the goals are that they want to complete. So, the whole point in talking about these different techniques that AI and these pathogens and toxins manifest is to explain how they're doing it. Right. This is why we came to this broadcast, is to explain, well, how do these technologies come into the body?
So we mentioned 6 ways. Do you want to recap?
They come in through the mosquitoes, through the ticks, through inhalants.
Right.
Through the quantum tunneling.
Through contactants.
And
ingestants.
And ingestants. Most of the technology comes in through injectants and through inhalants.
And as
quantum
attachments.
Tunneling. And as attachments, that's right, to MFI. Yeah. So think about like, a police officer in all of his uniform and all his like Batman belt is what we used to call it. Those are attachments. Those are all things that he can take off of his belt to use in a situation. You don't always need them. But boy, when you need them, you need it. And that's what MFI does. It comes in stacked with attachments, just like that Batman belt, except they're all quantum. So the key piece to come away with is this is just a very, we're just being very general here today. We're being extremely general. We're trying to be specific enough for everyone to understand the concepts of how these technologies work. But I spend weeks in the university talking about this,
right?
How they manifest like this. But this is the global way. The main way is through the injection of the mosquito. That's the primary vector, and the vaccines. Some people will get MFI through vaccines. Not so much anymore, because MFI is kind of a grid we've taken down. We've been very successful in doing that. And when we say that grid's been taken down, we mean people do not relapse and there are no new cases of MFI.
Right.
So that's been really, really great, seeing that infrastructure collapse because of the quantum work. That gets to that speaks to something that we don't have time to talk about today, but we'll talk about another time, about being quantumly entangled. That these devices are quantumly entangled, and when I quantumly release it from my body, if it's part of a grid system, the entire grid collapses.
Right.
Which is great.
Yeah.
Which is why the enemy hates this work.
Yes,
because
he does.
We can take grids down one by one by one, and that's what it's been like.
Right.
But that's the totality of these types of devices. Is they come in via mainly through the tick bites and the mosquito bites, which allows massive essential vaccination throughout the world. You can do that anywhere. You can release these pathogens anywhere, and they go into the body. So we'll just wrap up here. We just wanted to talk today about how they do it, how this is done. And a lot of times in client appointments, I don't have time to get down to the nitty-gritty and really spend a lot of time to explain how things are put into the body, the quantum devices. So I hope that helps. Hope we've given you at least like a 60,000 foot view of kind of how this all works. So anything else you want to add?
I don't think so. I think that was really good. It's good to hear. It's good to have some answers to the questions that come up.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, if you guys are interested, we'll just close up now. And if you guys are interested in this work, you can visit my website at www.quantumcommand.net. If you're interested in doing a session, you can definitely hit that first client appointment button, and that will get you right into my schedule. If you just want to do a consult, or we just talk about how this stuff is affecting you, we can absolutely do that. Just hit the consult button. And we just look forward to talking to you in the future.
Sounds great.
All right. You guys have a good day.
Bye.
Bye-bye.